Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. We start our news bulletin from Yemen, where over 70 government coalition soldiers are killed in an attack on a military training camp in southern city of Marib. State media has claimed that Houthi rebels attacked the site with ballistic missiles and drones. Medics say dozens of others were also wounded. The rebels have not yet claimed responsibility for the attack. Yemen's President Mansour Hadi says the military needs to be on high alert for battle after the attack. The Houthis, who hold Sana'a and most of Yemen's urban centers, say they are fighting a corrupt system. The civil war, now in its fifth year, has killed over 100,000 people, triggering one of the world's worst humanitarian crises. Meanwhile, in Lebanon, fresh clashes between police and protesters have wounded more than 200 people from both sides in the capital, Beirut. Police shot tear gas and water cannon to disperse the anti-government protests, who threw rocks and pots at them. Clashes broke out after demonstrators tried to reach Parliament Square in Beirut. The Lebanese are protesting over delays in forming a new cabinet to address the country's economic crisis. Lebanon's President Michael Aoun asked the army and security commanders to restore calm in central Beirut. Security forces say the situation is now under control in Beirut after a night of violent clashes. The unrest stemmed from anger at corruption and the rising cost of living in October last year. In Syria, U.S. troops have allegedly blocked Russian soldiers from reaching oil fields in northeastern Hasaka. This comes amid a dispute between Moscow and Washington about the Rumailin oil field. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says the U.S. soldiers did not let a Russian military convoy pass through their checkpoint in the border city of Al-Malikiya. The Russian soldiers later returned to their camp northwest of Hasaka. While tensions in the Middle East continue, the U.S. says it has imposed sanctions on Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, Brigadier General Hassan Shahwarpour. The State Department claimed the general commanded units are blamed for a massacre of protesters in November. The department said it is designating Shahwarpour under the U.S. law banning officials of foreign governments. Earlier, the State Department said it had received videos of the Revolutionary Guards opening fire on protesters in Mashhad County. Shahwarpour is a commander in Khuzestan province where Mashhad is located. The announcement comes amid high tensions between Tehran and Washington. Now we move on to Pakistan, where Prime Minister Imran Khan has warned if India continues its military attacks across the line of control, Pakistan will not remain an inactive observer. He said Indian occupation forces continue to target and martyr civilians across the line of control with increasing intensity and frequency. Khan said there is an urgent need for the UN to push India to allow Security Council's military observers inside occupied Kashmir. The Prime Minister reiterated that Islamabad fears an Indian false flag operation. India has clamped down the occupied Kashmir since August 5th, creating a humanitarian crisis in the valley. Meanwhile, U.S. Assistant Deputy State Secretary for South Asia, Alice Wells, is arriving in Islamabad today on a 4-day visit. The U.S. State Department said the visit is part of a 10-day tour to the region. Deputy Secretary Wells will head out to Sri Lanka and India after Pakistan. The department said she will meet senior government officials in the civil society to discuss issues of bilateral and regional concern. Her visit follows Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi's 3-day visit to the U.S. Moving on to India, threatening people opposing the citizenship law, India's ruling BJP leader Dilip Ghosh says they will soon be unable to show their faces. Earlier, Ghosh called the demonstrators parasites for coming on the streets against the controversial law. In a rally, he said those refusing to show registration papers proving their Hindu identity will soon face consequences. Meanwhile, another BJP minister, Chandra Sarangi, said the new bill is atonement for the sin of partition committed by the Congress. In a rally, Sarangi said the Amendment Act should have been passed 70 years ago. Also in India, women protesting in the capital city of New Delhi have slammed the BJP government's allegations of bribery. This follows allegations that women coming to the protest were being paid 500 rupees per day. In order to refute the allegations, the protesters displayed posters that read, "No cash, no pay TM." Talking to media, the organizers said the protesters have been asked not to take money from anyone by any means. Protesters said they have gathered to protect the 500 years which their ancestors have dedicated to India. They fear that if they don't raise their voices now, their children might be in danger in the future. The Shaheen Bagh sit-in has inspired nationwide rallies as similar demonstrations are being held in Bihar, Uttar Pradesh and Mumbai. In a related development, Bangladesh's Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina says India's Citizenship Amendment Act is unnecessary. Reacting to the law deemed discriminatory to Muslims, Hasina said New Delhi should review its stance. In an interview, Hasina said Dhaka cannot understand why the Indian government passed the act in the first place. The Prime Minister said people within India are facing many problems due to this development. Hasina said there has been no recorded reverse migration from India after passing of the law. To end the long-running war in Libya, rival camps and their foreign backers are arriving in Berlin for a summit to discuss various ways to resolve the issue. Germany and the UN hope to persuade Russia, Turkey and UAE and Egypt to get their opposing camps to agree on a lasting truce in Tripoli. Libya's internationally recognized Prime Minister Fayez Sarraj and the commander of the Eastern Forces, Khalifa Haftar, will attend the conference. US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has already arrived in Berlin. Leaders of Russia, Turkey, France and the UK have also confirmed their participation, while representatives of Algeria, Egypt, the UAE and China are also expected to attend. The UN says participants will sign a 6-point draft communique calling for a permanent ceasefire at the end of the conference. It said the draft will also implement an arms embargo and reforms in the security and economic sector. Moving on, American President Donald Trump says the US-Japan Treaty of Mutual Cooperation and Security is essential for both nations. January 19 marks 60 years since the revised Pact of Security Cooperation was signed. In a statement, Trump said the alliance has been crucial to peace, security and prosperity for the region, as well as the entire world. He also said that as the security environment continues to evolve, the alliance must be strengthened further. The president said he was confident that Tokyo's contributions to mutual security will continue to grow. Meanwhile, State Department spokesperson Morgan Ortagus said Washington will urge Tokyo to contribute more to the cost of keeping American forces in Japan. Meanwhile, in the U.S., thousands of women gathered for an annual march in Washington and over 180 other cities. They marked the third anniversary of demonstrations that drew millions of protesters a day after President Trump's inauguration. Crowds braved cold and wet weather to chant slogans demanding Trump's resignation. Thousands of women slammed the U.S. president's assault on reproductive rights, climate change and immigration. Despite the drop in numbers, with only a few thousand participants on the streets of Washington, activists remain hopeful about the power to organize. Similar marches were held in Chicago, New York, and Los Angeles. Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro says he is open to direct negotiations with the United States. In an interview published by a leading U.S. paper, Maduro said he was still comfortably in charge. Maduro said instead of ongoing confrontations, respectful dialogue between both governments can create a win-win situation. He said U.S. oil companies can benefit from Venezuela's oil if Washington were to lift sanctions. Maduro also expressed his willingness to talk with opposition leader Juan Guaido, but dismissed his central demand that he step down. The U.S. and over 50 other countries recognize Guaido as the country's legitimate interim president. Despite crushing U.S. sanctions, Maduro remains in power and is backed by Venezuela's military as well as Russia, China and Cuba. Scuffles have broken out on the Guatemala-Mexico border as a group of several hundred migrants pressed forward to cross. Mostly Honduran migrants were pushed back by Mexican security forces. Scores of people who entered Guatemala from Honduras have been arriving at the Mexican border. Guatemalan authorities say around 4,000 people have arrived in the country in the last few days. President Donald Trump has threatened to hurt Mexico and Central American countries economically if they allow large groups to reach the U.S. border. Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador said he has held out the prospect of jobs for the migrants who want to stay. Belgian police said they arrested 185 people after Extinction Rebellion protesters disrupted the Brussels Motor Show. Campaigners smeared cars with fake blood and staged die-ins around the displays. More in this report.
Some activists unfurled a banner reading "Stop CO2 emissions" at the main entry of the show, while others carried out protests at stands inside. A protester with his face covered in black oil chanted "Shell kills" before lying down opposite the oil and gas company's booth. The group said it had called the protest to correct the deceitful image the car industry portrays of itself.
It has been called the show of lies because we no longer believe in the car industry to provide solutions to this ecological and climate crisis. It has lied in the past and will continue to lie to us if we do not stop it.
Demonstrators were quickly taken away by police and security personnel after they briefly blocked access to the area. Later, demonstrators carried out a die-in outside the entrance and were also removed swiftly by the police without resisting arrest.
The aim is really to enable citizens to say to themselves, we do not want to continue to be under pressure from the car industry, because what we need is another model of mobility that promotes a whole host of alternatives that are socially and ecologically just as well.
According to the organizers of the show, over 500,000 people are expected to visit the 10-day car show, one of the largest of its kind in the country.
UK's Prince Harry and Meghan Markle are set to lose their titles and will not receive public funds for their royal duties. In a statement, Buckingham Palace announced the couple will no longer formally represent the Queen. Queen Elizabeth said a constructive way forward has been found after months of conversations. The Queen said she recognizes the challenges the couple has experienced as a result of intense scrutiny over the last 2 years. The Queen said she supports their wish for a more independent life. The couple will repay $3 million of taxpayer money spent on renovating Frogmore Cottage, which will remain their UK family home. The palace said the new arrangement comes into effect in spring this year. Welcome back. More news in detail. 10 burnt corpses of indigenous musicians have been discovered in a vehicle in Mexico's southern Guerrero state. State prosecutor says the bodies were found in Chilapa municipality after someone called an emergency line. The prosecutor said the victims were aged between 15 and 42 and belonged to the Nahuas indigenous group. Officials blamed the Los Ardilos cartel for the attack. A regional indigenous leader said members of Sensation musical group were returning to Alcozacan after a performance. Despite President Andrés Manuel Obrador's promise to root out violence, nearly 29,000 murders have reported last year. In Brazil, 6 people have died in floods and landslides triggered by torrential rains in southeastern Espírito Santo state. Firefighters said the victims were from the towns of Iconha and Alfredo Chavez. Officials said in just 24 hours, Alfredo Chavez recorded rainfall that it normally gets in the entire month of January. In the state, 2 elderly people died after a landslide engulfed their home in mud. Rescue officials said streets turned into rivers as raging muddy water swept away cars. Authorities said in Iconha, nearly all of the town's shops were destroyed. 7 trekkers have gone missing in Nepal's northwest Himalayan region after an avalanche hit their trail. Police say trekkers included 4 South Koreans and 3 local guides. Officials also say heavy rain and snowfall has triggered the landslide. They said the area where the avalanche struck the group is estimated to be about 150 kilometers northwest of capital Kathmandu. 4 helicopters have been deployed for the search and rescue mission. Officials say rough weather conditions are making the rescue operation difficult. 17 new cases of the mysterious new coronavirus have been reported in China. Health officials at the inland city of Wuhan said 3 patients are in severe condition, with 2 of them too critical to be moved. Officials say there are now 62 confirmed cases of the illness. Following WHO's warnings, airport authorities in the US are screening passengers from Wuhan. Similar measures are also being taken in Japan, Thailand, South Korea, Singapore, and Malaysia. 2 cases have also been reported in Thailand and 1 in Japan. Now, for the first time in months, the number of Australia's bushfires have dropped under 100 after heavy rainfall. The Bureau of Meteorology in Victoria has issued severe thunderstorm warnings for the 3 days that could lead to flooding. Now, wet weather has also led to power cuts and road closures. Authorities say at least 14 fires are still burning in Victoria and 69 in New South Wales. States of Victoria, New South Wales and Queensland are the country's popular tourist destinations. Tourism Council says the damages to the industry have reached over $688 million. Prime Minister Scott Morrison said the government will channel $52 million from National Bushfire Recovery Funds into the ISM industry. Tourism accounts for more than 3% of the country's annual economic output. Canada's federal government says it will help Newfoundland dig out after a massive blizzard buried cars and left thousands without power. Natural Resources Minister Seamus O'Regan said military reservists might be called in. O'Regan said the immediate priority is snow removal and clearing roads to the snowbound hospital. The storm dumped as much as 76.2 centimeters of snow on provincial capital St. John's. Authorities said a state of emergency remained in effect with businesses and the international airport closed. Earlier, Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau urged everyone to adhere to authorities' instructions. Now let's take a look at how the weather is in your city. Well, that's all for now. We'll see you at the top of the hour again. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.